Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are going to talk about the process of making a croquis and how to use that croquis to further develop your 2D exploration using your research images from our last video. So let's get started. So just to recap, you should be at the point where you have created your mood board images, and it could have been one big image. In this case, we've created just 3 in mine, just because that's the way I work. And so now we have the next page that we're going to do, which you might think would be color or something like fabrics because we've done so much work already, but we're actually just getting started. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about our croquis. So for starters, a croquis is basically going to be your person that you draw on, and in fashion we call those croquis. And so they are, you know, basically your figure that you're drawing on. Just to give you an example, I actually did a test drawing for my markers. I can show you the markers I showed you. This is actually how they draw, everybody. So this person I'm drawing on, this girl I'm drawing on, she is considered what we call a croquis. So basically what we do is we use them as a foundation for our clothing and to express the information that we are trying to portray with however we want to work with them, whether it's through their posture, the way they're posed, just what they're wearing. So this is our canvas. And we're working on this when we're illustrating. Basically, we use them in a form of hyper fantasized proportions because in fashion, from the very beginning, we have used this ideal body shape and ideal body size and ideal everything. And so this has kind of been something that has developed in the fashion world, and this is what you would learn to use if you were to go to school for illustration. Keep in mind, when you're designing a collection, a lot of times when you get out in the industry, or if you're working by yourself, you will have to cater your croquis illustrating to the person that you are designing for. So if you were designing for a petite consumer, your croquis would need to reflect that. If you were designing for children, you wouldn't want to design children's wear on a Missy-sized croquis. So with that being said, think about what you are going to create and think about what body proportions or body size measurements and the customer that you're trying to create your garments for. Think about them whenever you're designing this. So in order to create a pretty successful croquis, I learned with a really amazing book called 9 Heads. 9 Heads is a big giant book. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but it is quite hefty. So it is basically my Bible when it comes to working with the croquis and understanding fashion illustration as a whole, and it gives you a timeline in here. This is a really good tool if you don't have one and you're looking for a good book to use for fashion illustration. This will help you a lot. So all I'm going to talk about today is basically what we call the 9-head figure, and you can see it over here. This one here is just an 8-head, and it is defined by the amount of space that you have on the paper that's being taken up by the croquis form. So a head measurement, it depends on your paper, your proportion, but the head measurement will be what determines if it's an 8-head, a 9-head, 10-head, and so on. So in this case, I always work with what industry standard is for illustration, and that is I work with a 9-head. And you can work with an 8-head if you want to. It depends on your customer. You could work with a 9-head like me, or you could even go as far as to do a 10-head. So as you can see, this book really kind of is what I'm going to follow whenever I show you how to do this, because I feel like it is probably your best friend. We are only going to do a front view, so if you're interested in doing like side views or back views, let me know in the comments and I will gladly make a video for that. But just for the sake of the process for a development book, I'm just going to stick with fronts for now. So get this book because it's amazing. So just to show you in my hand drawing versions of the sizes, this is a page I made that represents the 8 head versus the 10 head. What I do is in between the two, and what I have is a page that I've created where I've labeled the different areas that you would put the drawings or the bodies, and then I've also placed the figures in a way that represents where they would actually be if you were drawing them individually. So you know, heads aren't pushed up to heads and feet aren't down to feet. So keeping them side by side like this can show you the proportions, and where, you know, the 10 heads hip line, for instance, is all the way at the waistline of the 8 head. And so when you're creating a 9 head, your goal is to get something in between. And so this is a quick, and I don't normally draw in Sharpie, and this is a very quick rendering that I've gone over with the Sharpie real quick. This is just to show you on camera so you can see the difference in the proportion. So in order to begin this process, you're actually going to need to make a page that outlines your figure. In order to do that, I highly suggest not using, or don't use, the sketchbook, because the sketchbook can kind of like tearing it out and stuff can get messy. So just take a regular old sheet of paper, and the first thing you want to do is create these horizontal lines across each one, and you want to create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. So if you create 10 lines, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 white spaces. So that's your goal, because the actual head, when you draw it, does not start at the top of the page. It starts in between. So these two right here. So see, this is your head space, but you're only going to draw the head in the second one. So when you label it, it'll be evenly spaced out, and at 0, nothing happens. And at 1, that is where you're going to draw the head. The section 2 will hold shoulders halfway through. So there's a dotted line here, that'll be the shoulder line. And then you'll have the apex at the most convex point of the breast line will be at the line at number 2. The waist and elbows meet at 3. Your ilium, or the part at your that slopes down into your hip line from your waist, here, is going to be at the center between 3 and 4. And then 4 is going to be your widest part. Your crotch level will be about 1/4 of an inch down, and your center thigh will be at 5, the knees at 6, the calves at 7, the shin at 8, the ankles at 9, and then your feet fall into that 10, which is technically the 11th space. So once you have your page like this, I would recommend, if you're first learning to do this, to take this that you've drawn as your hard copy and keep it, and don't ruin it. So make copies and copies and copies so you can draw on top of this over and over. But once you have your copies, you'll want to draw a vertical line down your page, splitting it, because that is going to be the vertical axis by which will balance your croquis. So once you've made a copy, like I've made a copy here, you can see there's even a difference, and this is why I like making copies. If you fill this page and then you try to put it on here, it's going to have no borders. When you print off a copy, it gives you a slight border so that it fits better in your sketchbook. And of course this depends on the size of your sketchbook, but it works for me. So for the demonstration, I'm just going to show you with pen, because pencil I don't think is going to show up very well on this. You're going to need a ruler. I like the metal rulers. I like them turned upside down because there's this little cork edge that catches if you don't. So what I mean by drawing that line is you're literally just going to make sure that you're drawing a center line and that it is perpendicular to your other lines. So once you have that line, that's where she's going to live, on that line. And everything about her weight will be distributed from this line. So to start, your head should just be, and you'll see this right here is your center, so everything should be pretty even. And so you have a head, and then your shoulder line is always going to be 2 of these widths. So the widest part of the face, and you can go ahead and draw that line, this times 2, if you were to bring that out, and then down is where that shoulder ball should be. So again, here, about here. So now you've got your shoulder balls. So your neck is actually going to come down and around, almost like you're connecting those shoulders to here. And you're just going to gradually draw them into your circles. Once you have that, you're going to draw the curve into the apex. And the apex is right at mid-shoulder. So if you bring your mid-shoulders down and you draw dots here and here, you've reached your apex. So in order to draw down into them, you're literally just drawing curves. And now you're going to draw into your waist. And so your waist is defined by you, and that is up to you to define that. It's not some measurement. I mean, ideally, what you'll see in the industry is a very small waist, you know, just to kind of give emphasis and drama. But you can choose that. It could be, you know, as wider or longer. It's up to your proportion. It just depends. But this is keeping things in a parameter. So for this case, I like to draw my waist just ever so slightly inside of my shoulder here. And so it'll actually go out a little bit underneath like this. And then it'll curve to the waistline here. And now that you've got your waist identified, remember that every single edge that you're drawing when you're using your pen or pencil, whatever, it will eventually become curved. So using a pen is probably not ideal, but you'll understand why later. So for your ilium and the widest hip part, I like to match the line of my balls here at the shoulder, and I like to drop those down onto my hip line to define the widest part of the hip. The ilium is just going to be a graduation from that waistline to here, so it will look almost like a curve, and you're doing your best to kind of match up that curve. Your crotch level is basically already defined for you. You don't really have to do that, so you're just going to draw a line, and it needs to be not, you know, too long, just enough, probably about maybe 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, depending on the girl. And at that mark where you have crossed into this hip line with your ilium, you're going to do another curve to the edges, and that is going to give you your crotch. Now that you've got that established, in order to get to your center thigh and knee, I find it helpful to identify your knee first. And so from your apex, I will go down straight through your waist, and at the waistline is where I like to keep my knees. So if I do it here and about here, all the way down to here and here, you want to ignore those because those are just markers, but this is where your actual knee is going to be. And so across just a little over from that dot, putting a curve in place will mark that knee line for you. Once you have that, it's really about distancing the width of the knee as much as you want to. This is going to be your inner knee, and your outer knee is going to just be slightly outside of that, like that. And so the hip line is going to go past the crotch level and is just going to be a smooth curve to that outside knee, like that. And your calf is going to be the distance here and here outside of the knee line on both sides, because the calf curves outward. So it's about here and here. and your inside knee is a pretty inverted curve going to leading down into the ankle. So in order to draw that line to meet up, I like to draw my outer line first. And so you'll go through here, and then from here, your ankle needs to match back up with the outside of your knee. And this will be slightly inside because your ankle is smaller than your knee, or at least in most drawings it is. So in this case, we went out for the calf, and now we're coming back in for that knee. And so we're going to go out, and we're just going to curve that leg out and down. And then coming back up to your crotch level, you're going to sort of curve it down in the opposite direction to your knee, because you don't want the same shape, because if you do the same shape, then obviously you're going to have a weird looking leg. And so again, you have a matching point to where your knee is. And this one, instead of doing that, is going to be a bit more straight, and you can make it as small and narrow as you like it to be. It's up to you. And basically at this point, the foot is a little weird, but I like to start, it's really easy if you just start thinking about it as a triangle at first, with a curved bottom. It's curved bottom and then triangle. So it's almost like a cone. So you draw down, round, and go out. And so there you have it. There's the feet and the legs in the basic proportion. And then when you're going up into your arms, it might be a little bit easier in the beginning to draw them down and around like this from the shoulders. And notice I'm doing one side and then the other. That's just how I've always worked, and you can go back in and change things later, so don't panic. But your first line should stop here at the apex. So this is the first part of your forearm, and this is what's going to connect. And you're just creating a sort of cylindrical shape. The inside of your elbow is going to be at that waistline, and it gets a little bit more narrow as you go down there. And so this line will be here. So here and here. And then it's going to kind of go out because your forearm goes out here. And it's going to be your wrist at your hip part. So to keep it in proportion, you're going to draw an outward curve on both sides, and then your wrist is going to meet on the outside of that curve. And then to draw your hands just past that, I like to draw a peak on the side opposite of the body, and then I like to draw a curve, and you can round that out, and then that would draw your hand. So it goes peak, and then a curve, and then a hand. So just to get your basic croquis down, that is what I do. Now, what you would do now is go in and be more defined and kind of pick and choose. Like if you want this a little bit wider, if you want the waist to be a little bit more curved, it's completely up to you. You know, some people don't like such big thighs, some people draw them like super skinny, but this is the basic foundation for your croquis. This is all you really need to move on into the next steps. And just to give you an idea of one that isn't so stagnant, I'm not going to be so precise with this, but you would still have that straight line. But the only thing is say we want to give it a little bit more of a curve. So we want the shoulders to go like this, and our head to still be straight up and down. We can curve our body inward, and then say we want our hips to go this way, right? So here's your crotch line, and here's your body. Now that we have our hips here, it's like, okay, what happens now with this line? what has to happen is the weight that's being distributed on the opposite side of the part that's being swung has to come back around to here. And the way that's going to work is you have to come back somehow to your line. So it doesn't really matter like which leg it is, as long as this line here is holding the weight of the croquis. So this is just what you need to get your 2D experimentation done, and then eventually when you're illustrating later in a part of the video, when you're actually giving this a very like finalized touch and stuff, it's up to you to create that story with the croquis figure and body, you know, depending on like what you're doing. So in this case, like if she was doing this, obviously her fabric would be moving, so when you're drawing that fabric, it'll be more effervescent than just a stagnant thing like this. But for the purposes of what we're doing, we're going to start with this one. Alright everybody, so we are in a different setting, as you can see. Last time I was filming, I got to the point where I was duplicating the croquis, but my camera died while I was at my studio, and so now I'm back at my house and we're just going to finish up here. So what we did last time is duplicated the drawing of the basic croquis, and I don't know if it caught it in the film because I haven't looked at it yet, but what you want to do is make copies of your duplication. So whether you're using tracing paper to duplicate or you're scanning them in, you want to make sure that you're getting copies of these so that you have multiple of them. You can see the actual croquis underneath, and as you saw in the sped up part, I just kind of went really quick and drew these as an outline. That's your goal, is to just get a base for what you're going to do. So what the camera did cut off was taking the research pages, which I've already kind of cut up, so it's hard to show you them, but your research pages were the pages that I had mentioned you would need to print off, these pages here, or they have different sizes and of your research images. And you're going to take those and you're going to cut them up, including your textures and color exploration page, this page here, and that's just a black and white version. That would be this page. You want to make sure you take this one as well and get those copied and scanned so you can cut them up. So what I did in the video that you didn't get to see was these pieces were a part of those images, and I cut them up and organized them by size and black and white, and sort of just different characteristics that were interesting together. I drew on top of them and cut them out, and so like for instance, this was a larger version of this one, and this one, these were cut into pieces like this gray piece and placed here, and the key piece was cut out and placed there. So I was just playing around and placing them kind of where I thought they would work, and then I realized I did not duplicate my croquis. So what I did this weekend is worked on just getting like a basic, very geometric croquis set up for everybody to look at, so they could see how the basic form works in comparison to this illustration. So I got these, which are not like, they're not rounded, they're not special in any way, they're just kind of like your you know, catch-all just for placing these pieces on top of it. What I'd recommend doing is drawing these once if you're first starting out, and then scanning them in. And I'd recommend having about 9 different exploration of silhouettes. So with this here, this is one for the very first mood board, and so for this I'm going to go ahead and move on and do it again, even though I already did it once here. I'm going to do it again so you can see me work with whatever pieces I have left from the first mood board research images. So I'm just going to speed this up, and once I speed it up, you'll be able to see how I'm placing it, and I'll explain how I did that afterwards. So let me go ahead and do that. Alright, so now that you've seen me kind of go around and select the different images, cut them up, and place them onto the croquis, you can start to see how they're not really defined garments necessarily, but how it's starting to develop into what might be garment-like. And so here in this one, I took the scraps from the images that I cut up in this one. And what I've done is try to play with shapes and silhouette and start thinking more about what it might be. So you can see in this one, I purposely kind of made this skirt and bustier and cape-like structure here. And here I really wanted to do pants and sleeve and then a dress. And there's no rules about whether or not, I mean, it could literally be slapped on there with absolutely no intent. Like you could just take something like this and just place it. There's really no rule. So what you'll do later is you'll start to think about how you can take these and make them more garment-like, or sort of develop them more in a three-dimensional idea way. So instead of keeping it 2D and flat on the page, you'll start thinking about how the garment might look if it was actually constructed. So once you have the croquis kind of played with, what you want to do is put them down in your sketchbook, but don't put them in here with glue, because you will need to scan these images so that way you can play with them. Another way you could do that is if you wanted to trace on top of them to play with them, or just visually look at them, but I would recommend gluing them in right at this stage. But eventually what you'll have is the images glued down in your sketchbook in the order that you created them, so there can be a process and they can see how you came up with silhouette. So what I'm going to do now, and I'll do this off camera just to save on time, is I will start to finish these out all together and use the leftover scraps that I have over here from my original research images. And I will finish another page, so I have 3 for each sketchbook, mood board in the sketchbook. And so, you know, you're keeping it really consistent with the amount that you're producing for each idea. So I recommend doing 9 total ideas to play with. Starting out, you would want to do more later, but I'm going to finish that, and then in the next video we will talk about fabric analysis, you know, kind of picking your color, your specific colors. After you have played with this, you'll kind of get an idea of the fabrics and the colors that you'd want and the selection process, and I'll go into information about how to do that, and sites and vendors and ways you can at least represent a fabric in a mood or in a product development book or a mood board, just using swatches or imagery that you've printed or gathered from the internet. Not necessarily you have to go out and get it or order it, because again, this is just showing your process. So that's all I have for this video, and if you enjoyed it, please like it, and if you want to follow the process of how to produce a fashion collection, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!